An orphaned hyena pup followed a wounded zebra, and their extraordinary bond shocked researchers beyond belief. In the merciless African savanna, where hyenas are born to hunt zebras, nature's deadliest enemies had somehow become inseparable allies. This wasn't just unusual behavior. It was supposed to be impossible. What these researchers documented next would challenge everything we thought we knew about wildlife, instinct, and the capacity for unlikely compassion in the animal kingdom. Dawn broke over the Serengeti as researchers began their routine wildlife monitoring. What they discovered that morning was anything but routine. A tiny hyena pup, barely 2 months old, huddled alone in the tall grass. No mother, no clan, just a trembling ball of spotted fur, facing almost certain death. In 15 years of field research, I've never seen a hyena this young survive without its clan, whispered Dr. Elena Mwangi, clutching her binoculars tightly. The odds were devastatingly against this little one. Hyena cubs typically spend their first year completely dependent on their mothers and the protection of their clan. Without this support, the pup faced starvation, dehydration, and becoming easy prey for lions, leopards, or even rival hyena clans. Each passing hour diminished its chances of survival. The research team watched as the desperate pup attempted to hunt, its awkward pounces on grasshoppers revealing its inexperience and growing hunger. Its pitiful calls for its mother went unanswered across the vast savanna. The researchers prepared themselves for the inevitable, knowing nature's harsh reality rarely offers second chances. But as the sun began to set on what should have been this orphaned pup's final day alive, the researchers spotted something in the distance that made them question everything they thought they knew about wildlife behavior. Half a mile from where the hyena pup struggled alone, a mature female zebra limped painfully across the sun-scorched savanna. Her left hind leg dragged behind her, a deep, jagged gash exposing raw flesh and sinew, almost certainly the result of a failed lion attack that she had somehow managed to escape. Dark, crimson blood matted her distinctive black and white coat, leaving a potent scent trail that would normally attract every opportunistic predator within miles. She was completely separated from her herd, recalled wildlife photographer Jabari Nkosi, who had been documenting zebra migration patterns for National Geographic. With that injury, we all thought she wouldn't last the night, perhaps not even the next few hours. Predators always target the weak and isolated. It's the brutal efficiency of natural selection at work. The zebra's breathing came in labored, shallow huffs as she attempted to graze on the sparse vegetation, her ears twitching nervously and her eyes constantly darting across the horizon for approaching threats. Each painful step seemed to require monumental effort, yet she persisted with remarkable determination that belied her grave condition. Unable to keep pace with her protective herd, she had become the textbook definition of vulnerable prey in an ecosystem where weakness is rarely forgiven. Dr. Mwangi's team had been tracking this particular zebra's herd for months as part of a comprehensive study on migration patterns affected by climate change. Zebras are intensely social animals with complex family structures, she explained, making notes in her field journal. Being separated from the herd isn't just dangerous from a survival standpoint. It's psychologically devastating for them. They simply aren't equipped, either physically or emotionally, to survive alone in this harsh environment. The research team observed through high-powered binoculars as the wounded zebra attempted to climb a small rise, presumably to gain better visibility of her surroundings. Her injured leg buckled beneath her weight, sending her stumbling before she regained her balance with visible frustration. Blood continued to seep from her wound, attracting a persistent cloud of flies that she weakly attempted to dislodge with flicks of her tail. In the Serengeti, a wounded animal like this typically has hours, not days, whispered research assistant Thomas Kimathi, his voice tinged with the resignation that comes from years of observing nature's unforgiving cycles. We've documented hundreds of similar cases. The pattern is almost always the same: isolation, weakening, predation. It's difficult to watch, but it's how this ecosystem has functioned for millennia. As the relentless African sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the golden grasslands, the wounded zebra finally collapsed beneath the spreading branches of an ancient acacia tree. Her sides heaved with exhaustion, foam flecking her muzzle as she lay on her side, seemingly surrendering to her fate. Several vultures had already begun to circle overhead, nature's patient undertakers sensing an imminent opportunity. The researchers prepared their notes and cameras, expecting to document the natural, if brutal, cycle of predation that maintains the savanna's delicate ecological balance. Dr. Mwangi checked her watch, making a note of the time, likely the last entry in this particular zebra's life history in their extensive research database. What happened next would challenge the fundamental laws of nature itself, upending decades of scientific understanding about interspecies relationships and forcing the researchers to question everything they thought they knew about animal behavior. As night descended over the savanna, painting the landscape in deep indigo shadows, the researchers prepared to leave their observation post. Equipment was being packed away, data sheets finalized, and hushed discussions about tomorrow's plans were underway when Dr. Mwangi suddenly raised her hand for silence. She had spotted movement in the tall grass. The orphaned hyena pup, somehow still alive despite the overwhelming odds, was cautiously approaching the wounded zebra beneath the sprawling acacia tree. We all froze in place, Dr. Mwangi later recounted in her field journal, her normally neat handwriting betraying her excitement with its hurried scrawl. This was about to become nature at its most brutal. A predator, however young and inexperienced, finding easy prey. We expected to witness either a pathetic failed hunting attempt or the zebra's last moments. Either way, it was going to be difficult to watch, but scientifically significant. The team watched, cameras whirring quietly as they captured every movement, as the tiny predator crept closer to the collapsed zebra. The natural order of the Serengeti, established over countless millennia, dictated what should happen next. Even a wounded zebra would likely kick out defensively at a hyena, while the hungry pup, driven by instinct and starvation, would attempt to take advantage of the zebra's vulnerability despite its own inexperience. But nature's ancient script was about to be completely rewritten before their astonished eyes. The hyena pup approached the zebra not from behind where the bleeding wound offered an obvious target, but circled around toward the zebra's head, a peculiar approach for a predator. The zebra raised her head weakly, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of a natural enemy, her eyes locking with the young predator's. For several tense moments that seemed to stretch into eternity, the two natural enemies regarded each other, predator and prey, separated only by inches and millions of years of evolutionary hostility. The air felt electric, whispered Jabari Nkosi, his camera clicking rapidly. It was like watching two actors who had forgotten their lines in nature's grand performance. Then, defying every biological imperative, the zebra did not strike out with her hooves or attempt to struggle to her feet. Instead, she lowered her head back to the ground with what appeared to be resignation or perhaps exhaustion. The researchers collectively held their breath, fingers poised over camera buttons, expecting the hyena's predatory instincts to take over in a burst of opportunistic violence. What happened instead left the entire research team speechless, questioning the evidence of their own eyes. The hyena pup, trembling slightly from either fear or hunger, curled up against the zebra's neck, pressing its tiny spotted body against her warm, black and white flank. More astonishingly, after a moment of tension, the zebra shifted slightly, as if accommodating the small creature beside her. The movement wasn't defensive or aggressive. It almost appeared protective. "I thought I was hallucinating," admitted research assistant Kamathi, rubbing his eyes repeatedly during his midnight observation shift. Hyenas and zebras are mortal enemies. Their relationship is hardwired into their DNA, fear and aggression on one side, predatory drive on the other. This simply doesn't happen. It can't happen according to everything we understand about wildlife behavior. Yet there it was, happening right in front of us. Throughout the night, the team took turns observing this impossible pairing through night vision equipment, meticulously documenting every interaction, every subtle movement. The hyena pup occasionally rose to inspect the zebra's wound, sniffing it but making no attempt to exploit it, behavior completely contrary to its species' opportunistic nature. The zebra, for her part, seemed to relax in the pup's presence, her breathing becoming less labored, occasionally turning her head to observe the small predator with what could only be described as tolerance. Around 3 a.m., something even more extraordinary happened, Dr. Mwangi noted. A jackal approached the pair, likely attracted by the scent of blood. The hyena pup, despite being half the jackal's size, positioned itself between the newcomer and the wounded zebra. It was a futile defensive posture from such a young animal, but the intent seemed unmistakable. Even more remarkably, the zebra managed to raise herself partially, adding her own threatening presence to the standoff. The jackal, confronted by this bizarre, united front, retreated in apparent confusion. By morning, as golden light spilled across the savanna, the most extraordinary development occurred. When the zebra struggled to her feet, swaying slightly but showing remarkable improvement in her stability, the hyena pup stayed close beside her, moving when she moved, stopping when she stopped. It was as if they had formed some unspoken alliance against their shared vulnerability in this harsh environment. Dr. Elena Mwangi, who had spent 20 years studying predator-prey dynamics, found herself at a loss for scientific explanation. In scientific terms, what we were witnessing was unprecedented, she explained during a hastily arranged video call with colleagues at the University of Nairobi. This wasn't just unusual behavior. It fundamentally contradicted everything we understand about predator-prey relationships and interspecies interaction. It was like watching water flow uphill or gravity reverse itself. We have documented cases of unusual animal friendships in captivity, of course, but nothing like this in the wild, especially between species so fundamentally opposed in the food chain. The team's wildlife veterinarian, Dr. Samuel Omondi, offered a tentative hypothesis. The zebra's wound had begun to show signs of infection. It's possible that the hyena's attention to the wound, licking it throughout the night as we observed, may have actually provided some cleaning benefit. Hyena saliva has been studied for its antimicrobial properties. It's a stretch, but perhaps there's some mutual benefit occurring that transcends their natural enmity. For animals driven by instinct rather than reason, such a partnership should have been impossible according to all established biological principles. Yet as the sun rose on a new day, casting long shadows across the awakening landscape, the orphaned hyena pup and wounded zebra moved together across the savanna, united by circumstances that science could not yet explain. The research team followed at a distance in their vehicle, documenting every interaction, every moment of this extraordinary relationship that would soon challenge wildlife biology's most fundamental assumptions and perhaps reveal something profound about survival, adaptation, and the complex web of life in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. Whatever happens next, Dr. Mwangi told her team as they followed the unlikely pair, we are witnessing something that will rewrite textbooks. The question now is this a one-time anomaly, or are we seeing something deeper about animal behavior that we've missed all along? The savanna awakened to a new day, indifferent to the biological miracle unfolding across its sun-drenched expanse. Dew-laden grass shimmered in the early morning light as creatures great and small resumed their ancient dance of survival. Yet amid this timeless rhythm, something unprecedented was occurring. Something that challenged the very foundations of natural science. The wounded zebra and orphaned hyena pup began what would become an extraordinary journey together, their unlikely alliance defying the natural order that had governed these plains for millennia. They were heading north, noted Dr. Mwangi, tracking the pair through high-powered binoculars from the research vehicle. Her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of this remarkable observation. Toward the Mara River, following what appeared to be the same migration route the zebra's herd had taken days earlier. It suggests the zebra retained her migratory instinct despite her injury. And somehow, the hyena pup was following her lead rather than its own instinctual patterns. The zebra's condition had improved marginally overnight. Though still limping heavily, the wound appeared less inflamed, and she moved with greater purpose, stopping periodically to graze on patches of grass that had survived the dry season. The hyena pup stayed consistently at her side, occasionally darting ahead to investigate sounds or movements before returning to its unlikely companion with what the researchers could only describe as apparent excitement. The dynamics between them shifted constantly, observed Thomas Kimathi, making detailed notes on their behavior patterns. Sometimes the pup seemed to take a protective stance, particularly when birds or small mammals approached. Other times, it appeared almost childlike, playful even, as if it had imprinted on the zebra as a surrogate parent. Neither behavior makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. By midday, the scorching heat had become oppressive, the temperature climbing well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The research team, protected in their vehicle with water supplies and shade, found the conditions challenging. For the wounded zebra and vulnerable pup, such heat could prove fatal. With remarkable intuition, the zebra found shade beneath a cluster of umbrella thorn trees where both animals rested. The research team observed from a distance as the pup curled against the zebra's flank, seeking refuge from the relentless sun. Their behavioral synchronization was remarkable, Dr. Omandi observed, reviewing the morning's footage on his tablet. They were adapting their patterns to accommodate each other's needs. The zebra grazed when the hyena rested and moved when the hyena seemed restless, almost like a negotiated compromise between species that should never cooperate. We're seeing evidence of what appears to be interspecies communication that goes beyond mere tolerance. The team's ethologist, Dr. Sarah Njeri, who had joined them that morning after hearing about the phenomenon, added her professional assessment. What's particularly fascinating is the absence of predatory behavior from the hyena. Even orphaned predators typically retain their hunting instincts. This pup should be practicing stalking and pouncing, even in play. Instead, it's exhibiting behavior more consistent with social bonding, behavior normally reserved for members of its own species. The afternoon brought the first significant challenge to their partnership. A small bachelor group of 3 male lions was spotted on the horizon, moving with predatory intent toward the vulnerable pair. The lions, young adults recently ousted from their pride, appeared hungry and opportunistic. exactly the kind of threat that would normally spell doom for an injured zebra and a hyena pup. "We thought this would be the end," Jabari recalled, his camera capturing the approaching danger in a rapid sequence of high-resolution images. Nature would finally reassert its fundamental laws. None of us spoke, but I think we were all preparing ourselves to witness the brutal conclusion to this unusual story. The zebra detected the threat first, her ears pivoting forward and her body tensing visibly. The hyena pup, sensing its companion's alarm, pressed closer to the zebra's legs, looking up at her as if for guidance. What happened next astonished even the most experienced researchers on the team. Instead of abandoning the hyena pup to save herself, the expected survival response for any wild animal, the zebra positioned herself between the approaching lions and the vulnerable young predator. She stomped her front hooves against the ground in a display of defensive aggression rarely seen in isolated zebras, producing a deep, resonant sound that carried across the savanna. Her ears flattened against her head, and she bared her teeth in a display that seemed almost incongruous for a herbivore. It was textbook protective behavior, Dr. Nyeri whispered, but completely misapplied according to everything we understand about interspecies relationships. She was treating this hyena pup as if it were her own foal. The lions, perhaps confused by this unusual behavior from what should have been easy prey, hesitated in their approach. This momentary uncertainty gave the zebra and hyena pup enough time to retreat toward a nearby rocky outcropping, terrain that would disadvantage the larger predators who preferred ambush hunting in the open grasslands. It was a calculated defensive maneuver, Dr. Mwangi explained later during their evening debrief. The type of strategic response we'd expect from herd animals protecting their young, not from a prey animal defending a natural predator. The zebra deliberately chose terrain that would maximize their chances of survival against a superior force. As the lions began to close in again, the hyena pup did something equally remarkable. Instead of freezing in terror or attempting to hide, it began emitting a series of high-pitched calls. Not the typical hyena vocalizations, but something more urgent and distinctive. Within minutes, these calls were answered from the distance. "We couldn't believe what we were hearing," Jabari said. Those were adult hyena responses. Somehow, this pup had managed to call for reinforcement from what must have been a distant clan. The approaching lions paused again, clearly calculating the changing risk factors as the distant calls of adult hyenas grew louder. After several tense minutes, the lion trio abandoned their pursuit, melting back into the grasslands in search of less complicated prey. It was a perfect demonstration of mutualism emerging spontaneously in a crisis, Dr. Omondi noted. The zebra provided physical protection, while the hyena provided communication with its species. Communication that ultimately saved both their lives. As dusk approached, painting the savanna in deep oranges and purples, the unlikely pair reached the rocky outcropping, finding relative safety among the boulders where larger predators couldn't easily follow. The research team maintained their distance, setting up night observation equipment with infrared capabilities to continue documenting this unprecedented relationship through the dangerous hours of darkness, under the vast canopy of stars that emerged one by one in the deepening twilight. The zebra and hyena settled into what appeared to be a routine. The pup curled against the zebra's warm body while she remained vigilant, ears constantly moving to detect threats in the darkness. Occasionally, the zebra would groom the hyena pup with gentle nuzzles, behavior typically reserved for zebra foals. What we were witnessing went beyond simple mutual benefit or temporary alliance, Dr. Mwangi noted in her journal that night. the glow of her tablet illuminating her face in the darkness of the research tent. There appeared to be genuine attachment forming, a bond that transcended biological programming and evolutionary history. If this continues, we may need to reconsider everything we thought we understood about animal cognition, emotional capacity, and interspecies relationships. The night passed without incident, though the distant roars of lions and whoops of hyenas served as constant reminders of the dangers that surrounded the mismatched pair. The research team took shifts monitoring the infrared feed, documenting every interaction, every subtle behavioral nuance that might help explain this scientific anomaly. Around 3 a.m., something remarkable happened, reported Dr. Njeri, who had taken the pre-dawn observation shift. The hyena pup appeared to be having what we might anthropomorphically call a nightmare, twitching and whimpering in its sleep. The zebra responded by gently nickering and increasing physical contact, much as a mother zebra would comfort a distressed foal. The pup immediately calmed. This suggests a level of emotional attunement between species that simply shouldn't exist according to our current understanding. As the first day of their journey together ended and a new dawn approached, the researchers couldn't help but wonder what the coming days would reveal about this extraordinary partnership, and whether it could possibly endure in a wilderness governed by the harsh realities of survival. They had witnessed not just an anomaly, but potentially a profound insight into animal cognition and the flexibility of behaviors previously thought to be hardwired. Perhaps, Dr. Mwangi suggested as the team gathered for breakfast, watching the first rays of sunlight illuminate the rocky outcropping where the zebra and hyena were beginning to stir. What we're seeing isn't contrary to nature at all, but a glimpse into its deeper complexity. A reminder that life's fundamental drive to survive sometimes finds solutions that transcend the boundaries we've drawn in our scientific understanding. The day ahead promised new challenges for this improbable pair. The continuing journey toward the Mara River, the ever-present threat of predators, and the basic needs for food and water that would test their unusual bond. For the research team, it presented an unparalleled opportunity to document what might be one of the most significant observations in the history of behavioral ecology. Whatever happens, Dr. Mwangi told her team, we are witnessing something extraordinary. Something that may ultimately tell us as much about ourselves and our understanding of the natural world as it does about these two remarkable animals. The second day of the journey dawned with golden light spilling across the savanna, painting the landscape in warm amber hues. Dew glistened on every blade of grass like scattered diamonds, evaporating into delicate mist as the temperature began to rise. The zebra and hyena pup emerged from their rocky sanctuary, silhouetted against the rising sun, a tableau so incongruous that the researchers found themselves repeatedly checking their equipment to ensure they were documenting every moment of this scientific anomaly. Dr. Mwangi, who had barely slept, watched through her binoculars as the pair performed what appeared to be a morning ritual. The zebra carefully stretching her injured leg, while the hyena pup circled around her, occasionally sniffing the wound that now showed clear signs of healing. The pup's attention to the injury had become a consistent behavior, almost methodical in its application. The improvement in the zebra's condition is remarkable, Dr. Omandi noted, examining the telephoto images on his tablet with growing amazement. The infection appears to be receding. The swelling has decreased by approximately 30% since our first observations, and the zebra's range of motion has improved significantly. I can only theorize that the hyena's continued attention to the wound, the licking behavior we've observed at regular intervals, may be providing some antimicrobial benefit. Hyena saliva contains compounds that could potentially combat certain bacteria. It's a hypothesis that would have seemed absurd a week ago. But now, he trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. Jabari, who had been reviewing the night footage, added another observation. The zebra's sleep patterns have normalized as well. Last night, she achieved what appears to be REM sleep for several extended periods, something that would be extremely unusual for an injured, isolated zebra in the wild. They typically remain semi-alert even when resting. The presence of the hyena pup seems to be allowing her to fully rest and recover. As the morning progressed, the unlikely duo continued their northward journey. The research team followed at a respectful distance, their vehicle crawling across the uneven terrain. Their progress was slow but deliberate, the zebra setting a pace that accommodated both her injury and her small companion's endurance. Occasionally, the pair would pause as the zebra grazed on patches of suitable vegetation, while the hyena pup explored the immediate vicinity, never straying more than 20 meters from its unlikely companion. Their movement patterns suggest intentionality, Dr. Nieri observed, marking their trajectory on a digital map. They're maintaining a remarkably consistent northward heading, deviating only to avoid obstacles or when resources are available. This isn't random wandering. They appear to have a destination. Around mid-morning, they encountered their first significant obstacle. A wide gully carved by seasonal rains, approximately 4 meters across at its narrowest point and nearly 3 meters deep. The erosion-carved channel represented a formidable barrier, too broad for the injured zebra to jump and too steep for an easy descent and climb. This is where natural differences should become insurmountable, Dr. Nieri predicted, closing her notebook with a sense of finality. The hyena could easily navigate that gully with its compact body and agile movements, while the zebra would need to find another way around. Potentially a detour of several kilometers. Logically, this should separate them. If they maintain their partnership beyond this point, we're looking at something that transcends mere convenience or temporary alignment of interests. Yet once again, the animals defied expectations. The zebra paced along the edge of the gully, her head low as she seemed to study the obstacle, ears flicking back and forth in what the researchers had come to recognize as a sign of problem-solving focus. The hyena pup, instead of proceeding on its own, stayed with her, occasionally venturing a short distance ahead before returning, as if scouting potential paths. "Look at that," whispered Kimathi, pointing to his tablet where he was recording behavioral notes. The pup isn't just following. It's actively participating in the problem-solving process. See how it keeps returning to the zebra after each exploration? It's almost like they're consulting with each other. After nearly an hour of this behavior, the hyena pup's explorations led them to a section where the gully narrowed considerably, the gap reducing to just under 3 meters. Here, the zebra paused, seeming to assess the jump. With a determination that surprised the observers, she backed up several paces, gathered herself, and managed an awkward leap across, landing heavily but safely on the other side, despite her injury. The hyena pup, with its smaller frame, had no difficulty following, scrambling across with the natural agility of its species. Once reunited, the observers noted what appeared to be a moment of celebration. The zebra lowered her head to the pup, who responded by pressing against her foreleg briefly before they resumed their journey. "Problem-solving through cooperation," Dr. Mwangi whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "They're adapting to challenges by combining their different perspectives and abilities." The hyena found the narrowest crossing point, and the zebra executed the difficult jump. This goes beyond instinctual behavior. We're seeing evidence of what appears to be collaborative decision-making across species. Dr. Omondi nodded thoughtfully. In evolutionary terms, this kind of cooperation typically emerges only after thousands of generations of co-evolution, like the relationship between honey guides and honey badgers. To see it manifest spontaneously between natural enemies, it challenges fundamental assumptions about behavioral plasticity in wild animals. By early afternoon, the landscape began to change. The open grasslands gave way to scattered woodlands. Acacia trees with their distinctive umbrella shapes dotted the terrain with increasing frequency, and patches of denser vegetation appeared, indicating they were approaching the river ecosystem. The transition zone between savanna and riverine forest created a mosaic of habitats, rich in biodiversity but also fraught with new dangers. The denser vegetation presented new challenges. Reduced visibility meant increased danger from ambush predators like leopards, who would find the injured zebra a tempting target. The researchers noted a significant shift in the pair's behavior as they entered this more complex environment. The zebra became more alert, her ears constantly swiveling to capture sounds from all directions, her stride becoming more measured, pausing frequently to survey their surroundings. The hyena pup, meanwhile, relied more on its acute sense of smell, often moving ahead to investigate scents before the zebra would proceed, occasionally emitting soft vocalizations that seemed to communicate all clear signals. They're compensating for each other's sensory limitations, Jabari observed, capturing the behavior with his camera. The zebra has superior vision and hearing, particularly advantageous for detecting threats at a distance, while the hyena has better olfactory capabilities that can detect predators that might be hidden from sight. Together, they're more aware of their surroundings than either would be alone. It's a complementary security system. It's remarkable adaptation, agreed Dr. Njeri. But what's truly fascinating is how quickly this complementary behavior developed. Adaptive behaviors typically emerge through generations of natural selection or through extended periods of socialization. These animals have been together for less than 72 hours. As the afternoon progressed, the heat became oppressive, and the research team observed the pair seeking shade beneath a cluster of fever trees. The zebra seemed to be showing signs of fatigue, her injured leg occasionally buckling slightly as she walked. The hyena pup, displaying what could only be described as attentiveness, remained close, adjusting its pace to match the zebra's increasingly labored movements. They need water soon, Dr. Omandi noted with concern. The zebra, particularly, is showing signs of dehydration. The wound may be healing, but she's expending considerable energy, and water sources in this transitional zone can be unpredictable during the dry season. As if in answer to this observation, the hyena pup suddenly became more animated, its nose working the air currents before it darted off in a southeastern direction. The zebra, after a moment's hesitation, followed, trusting the pup's lead. The research team tracked them as they moved through increasingly dense vegetation until they emerged at a small, secluded watering hole. Little more than a depression where groundwater had collected, partially concealed by surrounding foliage. The watering hole was already occupied by a small family group of warthogs, a mother and 4 half-grown juveniles, their tails held straight up like antennas as they drank warily from the muddy pool. Normally, these species would maintain careful distance from each other, particularly at vulnerable moments like drinking. Warthogs are notoriously skittish, and hyenas are known to prey on their young. Instead, after an initial period of mutual wariness, the warthogs freezing in place, the zebra stopping several meters from the water's edge, something remarkable occurred. The hyena pup, instead of displaying any predatory interest, sat down at a respectful distance. The zebra, following this lead, lowered her head slightly in what almost appeared to be a non-threatening gesture. For several tense moments, the standoff continued. Then, the mother warthog, after a series of nervous grunts, seemed to make a decision. She resumed drinking, though her posture remained alert. Taking this as permission, the zebra approached the water, and the hyena followed at a respectful distance. For several minutes, these naturally incompatible species shared the precious water resource in an uneasy but functional truce. The researchers watched in fascination as the established rules of engagement between these species were temporarily suspended. It's as if the other animals can sense that something about this pair is different, Dr. Nyeri suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. Their unusual alliance seems to be changing how they're perceived by other species. The natural boundaries are shifting. The warthogs clearly recognize the hyena as a potential predator. Look at how the mother keeps positioning herself between the pup and her young. But they're not responding with their typical flight response. Could it be that the presence of the zebra is functioning as some sort of social buffer? Kamathi wondered. Perhaps the warthogs are reading the zebra's acceptance of the hyena as a signal that the normal predator-prey dynamics are suspended in this particular context. Dr. Mwangi nodded thoughtfully. It's possible. Social information transfer across species boundaries is still poorly understood, but we know many savanna species observe and respond to the alarm signals of other species. This could be an extension of that phenomenon, a novel form of interspecies communication emerging from an unprecedented situation. After drinking their fill, the zebra and hyena pup continued their journey, now moving with renewed energy. The afternoon wore on, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the increasingly wooded landscape. The researchers noted another curious behavior as the day progressed. When the pair encountered a patch of open ground covered with soft sand, ideal for tracking, the hyena pup seemed to deliberately walk in the zebra's footprints for several meters, placing its paws precisely where the zebra's hooves had left impressions. That's predator concealment behavior, Dr. Nyeri observed with surprise. Young hyenas are taught by their mothers to hide their tracks when approaching certain hunting grounds. But it's being applied in a completely different context here, almost as if the pup is trying to minimize evidence of their passage together. Or perhaps, suggested Dr. Omondi, it's attempting to disguise its own vulnerability by associating its scent and tracks with the zebra. A small, isolated hyena pup would be targeted by numerous predators, including adult male lions, leopards, and even other hyena clans. By masking its presence within the zebra's stronger sensory footprint, it gains a measure of protection. As evening approached, bringing with it the cooler air and long shadows that signal the most dangerous time on the savanna, the zebra and hyena found shelter beneath a dense acacia thicket. The thorny branches provided natural protection from larger predators, creating a defensible space for the night. The research team, maintaining their distance, set up their observation equipment for another night of documentation. They've traveled approximately 7 kilometers today, Dr. Mwangi noted, reviewing the GPS data. Not remarkable for a healthy zebra, but impressive given the injury and the need to accommodate the pup's shorter stride. At this rate, they should reach the Mara River within 3 to 4 days. As darkness fell, the research team gathered around their camp table, sharing observations and theories about what they were witnessing. The usual scientific detachment had given way to a deeper emotional investment in the outcome of this unprecedented partnership. I've been thinking about what we're actually observing here, Dr. Nyeri said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Beyond the obvious violation of expected species interactions, there's something more fundamental happening. We're seeing evidence of behavioral plasticity at a level that challenges our understanding of how fixed animal behavior patterns really are. Dr. Omondi nodded. The traditional view has been that while animals can adapt their behaviors within certain parameters, the fundamental patterns, especially those governing predator-prey relationships, are hardwired through millions of years of evolution. What we're witnessing suggests those boundaries are far more flexible than we've assumed. Under the emerging stars, Dr. Mwangi contemplated the day's observations, making final notes in her journal by the light of her headlamp. We're witnessing not just an anomaly in nature, but perhaps a glimpse into the flexibility of animal behavior. A reminder that what we consider fixed biological imperatives may actually be adaptable under the right circumstances. Perhaps what we're seeing isn't an aberration, but a window into evolutionary processes that normally occur too slowly for us to observe directly. As darkness enveloped the landscape, the distant roars of lions echoed across the savanna, a reminder of the dangers that still threatened this improbable partnership. Yet within their thorny sanctuary, the zebra and hyena pup settled close together. The pup curled against the zebra's flank, finding in each other's presence a security that defied the natural order, but somehow, against all odds, worked. Through the night vision cameras, the research team observed periodic moments of alertness. The zebra raising her head at distant sounds, the hyena occasionally sniffing the air. But overall, both animals appeared to rest more deeply and securely than either would have managed alone in this dangerous environment. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, Dr. Mwangi told her team as they prepared for their own rest. They're moving into territories where both lion and leopard densities increase, and they'll be approaching areas frequented by other hyena clans. The social dynamics will become increasingly complex. The journey would continue tomorrow, bringing them closer to the Mara River and to new challenges that would test the boundaries of their extraordinary bond. But for tonight, under the vast African sky filled with stars, an injured zebra and an orphaned hyena pup had found in each other something that transcended the ancient enmity between their species. A partnership that offered both protection and companionship in a wilderness where survival alone was typically the only imperative. As the research team settled into their tents, the questions multiplied. Was this truly a unique anomaly, never to be repeated? Or were they witnessing something that challenged the very foundations of behavioral ecology? A reminder that nature's complexity still held mysteries beyond current scientific understanding? Only the coming days would tell, as this unlikely pair continued their remarkable journey across the savanna. Dawn of the third day broke with a symphony of birdsong cascading through the increasingly lush landscape. Crimson and gold streaked across the eastern sky, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy of acacia and fig trees that lined the approaching riverine ecosystem. The vegetation had grown noticeably denser as the zebra and hyena pup continued their journey northward. The transition from savanna to gallery forest signaling their inexorable approach to the life-giving waters of the Mara River. Morning mist clung to the ground like a diaphanous veil, creating an ethereal atmosphere as the unlikely pair emerged from their thorny shelter, their breath visible in the cool morning air. They've entered one of the most biodiverse and dangerous sections of the migration route, Dr. Mwangi observed, studying the terrain through her binoculars, the lenses occasionally fogging from the humidity. This transitional zone between savanna and riverine forest hosts a higher concentration of predators than the open grasslands. The next 24 hours will be critical for their survival. If they're going to encounter insurmountable obstacles, it will likely be here. The research team had risen before sunrise, positioning their vehicle at a discreet distance along a natural ridge that offered visibility without disturbing the subjects. Equipment had been meticulously prepared. Cameras with telephoto lenses mounted on stabilizers, directional microphones calibrated to filter out ambient forest sounds, and thermal imaging equipment to track the pair if they ventured into dense undergrowth. This morning marked the beginning of their third day of continuous observation. And despite the physical fatigue, the team's scientific excitement remained palpable. The morning light revealed that the zebra's condition had continued to improve dramatically. Her gait showed greater stability, with less pronounced favoring of the injured leg. And the wound on her flank had developed a healthy scab, with minimal swelling around the edges. The hyena pup appeared more confident as well, its movements more assured as it trotted alongside its striped companion, occasionally darting ahead to investigate interesting scents before returning to maintain what had become their standard formation. The physical improvements are remarkable, Dr. Omondi noted, making detailed entries in his medical observation log. The wound is showing textbook signs of proper healing. The inflammatory phase appears to be resolving, and we're seeing evidence of the proliferative phase beginning. This kind of recovery trajectory would be impressive, even in a controlled veterinary setting, let alone in the wild with limited rest and constant movement. I'm particularly fascinated by the behavioral developments. Look at how they're moving. The spacing between them has become more consistent, almost like they've established an optimal distance for communication and protection. It's reminiscent of the spatial relationships we see in bonded pairs of the same species. Jabari, who had been monitoring their movement patterns, added, "They've developed what appears to be a coordinated vigilance system as well. Notice how they rarely focus their attention in the same direction simultaneously. When the zebra is grazing or drinking, the hyena maintains perimeter awareness. When the hyena is investigating something, the zebra's head is up and alert. It's an efficient division of security responsibilities that maximizes their collective awareness." As the morning progressed and the mist burned away under the strengthening sun, the temperature began to rise rapidly. The research team tracked the pair's progress through increasingly verdant terrain, where the ground vegetation grew thicker and the tree canopy provided dappled shade. The abundance of life in this ecosystem was evident. Butterflies fluttered between flowering bushes, birds darted through the branches overhead, and occasionally small antelope could be glimpsed moving through the undergrowth. Around mid-morning, the pair encountered their first major challenge of the day. A herd of Cape buffalo, approximately 30 strong, grazing in a meadow directly along their path. The massive bovines, with their formidable horns and notorious unpredictability, represented a significant threat. Buffalo are among the most dangerous animals in Africa, responsible for numerous human fatalities each year, and they harbor a particular animosity toward predators like hyenas. A confrontation seemed inevitable. The zebra halted at the meadow's edge, her ears pricked forward and nostrils flaring as she processed the complex olfactory and visual information. The hyena pup pressed close to her legs, its body language suggesting it was acutely aware of its vulnerability in this situation. For several minutes, they remained motionless, assessing the situation from the relative safety of the tree line. "This should be another natural boundary," Dr. Njeri whispered, her voice barely audible as she documented their behavior. Buffalo would normally charge a hyena on sight. They're one of the few prey species that will actively pursue and attempt to kill predators rather than simply escape. And they're numerous enough to pose a serious threat even to a healthy zebra, let alone one with an injury. By all conventional understanding, this obstacle should force them to either separate or make an extensive detour. What happened next demonstrated yet another unexpected adaptation in their evolving partnership. Instead of attempting to pass directly through the herd or making a wide, energy-consuming detour, the zebra began moving along the meadow's perimeter, maintaining a consistent distance from the buffalo while continuing their northward trajectory. The hyena pup matched this strategy perfectly, staying on the side of the zebra furthest from the buffalo, effectively using its larger companion as a shield while remaining close enough to benefit from their cooperative vigilance system. The buffalo, though clearly aware of their presence, several bulls turned to watch their progress, and one took a few threatening steps in their direction before returning to grazing. Made no concerted move to charge or pursue. It was as if the unusual pairing confused the buffalo's typical threat assessment process, creating enough uncertainty to prevent an aggressive response. "They're threading the needle?" Jabari observed with admiration, his camera capturing the nuanced interaction. Close enough to maintain their course, but far enough to avoid triggering the buffalo's defensive response threshold. It's a sophisticated navigation of a complex social boundary. What's remarkable is how they're presenting themselves. Notice how the zebra is keeping her body oriented toward the buffalo. She's not showing signs of flight behavior, which might trigger a pursuit response. Instead, she's displaying neutral movement patterns that don't register as either threatening or fleeing. Dr. Mwangi nodded thoughtfully. It's reminiscent of how experienced guides navigate elephant herds on foot, maintaining a presence that's neither threatening nor vulnerable. But this is a zebra instinctively applying a complex behavioral strategy that benefits both herself and a natural enemy. The cognitive flexibility required for this adaptation is extraordinary. As the pair successfully navigated past the buffalo herd, the research team relocated their observation position, carefully circumnavigating the meadow to maintain visual contact. The terrain was becoming increasingly challenging for the vehicle, with dense vegetation limiting their movement options. Dr. Mwangi made the decision to establish a base camp near the expected route and continue observations on foot when necessary, using handheld equipment and maintaining appropriate safety protocols. By midday, the sounds of running water became audible in the distance, the unmistakable rush and gurgle of a substantial river in flow. They were approaching the Mara River, the lifeblood of the ecosystem, and the critical barrier that migrating herds must cross, often at great peril. The vegetation had transformed into a true gallery forest, with tall trees creating a multi-layered canopy overhead, and dense undergrowth restricting visibility to mere meters in some places. Shafts of sunlight penetrated the leafy ceiling, creating pools of golden light on the forest floor. This environment, while offering more cover from aerial predators and relief from the sun, also harbored new dangers. The limited visibility made ambush predators like leopards a particular threat. The research team was forced to parallel their route rather than follow directly, using their knowledge of the terrain to anticipate the pair's emergence at various clearings and natural gaps in the vegetation. During one such observation period, positioned at a small natural glade where animal trails converged, they witnessed a heart-stopping encounter. As the zebra and hyena pup entered the clearing from the southern edge, moving with the careful deliberation that had characterized their journey, a leopard, previously unseen on a low-hanging branch of a massive fig tree, dropped silently to the ground mere meters from them. The predator, a young female with distinctive rosette patterns that the researchers recognized from previous studies, immediately assumed a hunting posture. Her muscular body low to the ground and eyes fixed intently on the zebra's injured flank. "This is it," breathed Kimathi, his camera whirring as he documented the confrontation, the rapid-fire shudder barely audible over the sudden tension. A solitary leopard is the perfect predator for this situation, powerful enough to take down an injured zebra, but small enough to be intimidated by a hyena clan. Except there is no clan here, just a pup. By all natural law, we're about to witness the end of this extraordinary partnership. The zebra's reaction was immediate and surprising, instead of fleeing, which would have exposed her vulnerable hindquarters and potentially abandoned the hyena pup. She turned to face the leopard directly, positioning herself slightly in front of the young predator. Her ears flattened against her head in an unmistakable display of aggression, and she issued a loud, challenging snort that echoed through the clearing. Her front hooves pawed at the ground, stirring up small clouds of dust in a classic threat display, normally reserved for territorial disputes with other zebras. The hyena pup, meanwhile, began emitting a series of high-pitched calls, the same distinctive vocalizations they had observed during the lion encounter days earlier. These calls, typically used by juvenile hyenas to summon adult clan members when threatened, echoed through the forest with surprising volume for such a small animal. The pup's body language was a complex mixture of fear and defiance. Its hackles raised, but its body positioned strategically behind the zebra's protective stance. The leopard hesitated, clearly confused by the zebra's aggressive stance rather than flight response, and perhaps uncertain about the implications of the hyena's calls. Leopards typically rely on the element of surprise, preferring to abandon hunts that don't proceed according to their expectations rather than risk injury. For a tense minute, the three animals formed a tableau of suspended action. Predator and prey locked in a standoff that defied natural patterns. Then, remarkably, the leopard backed down. With a final hiss of frustration and a lashing of its tail, it slunk back into the undergrowth, unwilling to risk injury against this unusual alliance that presented an unpredictable threat assessment. "Extraordinary," whispered Dr. Mwangi, her scientific detachment momentarily overcome by the drama they had witnessed. The zebra's defensive posture combined with the hyena's alarm calls created enough uncertainty to deter an apex predator. They're leveraging their partnership in ways that enhance both their survival chances. What we're seeing is a form of behavioral symbiosis that has developed in a matter of days rather than evolutionary timescales. Dr. Omondi nodded, his expression thoughtful. It makes me wonder about the neurological basis for this adaptation. We know that both species have significant behavioral plasticity, the ability to modify responses based on experience. But this goes beyond simple learning. They're integrating their different defensive strategies into a coordinated response that capitalizes on each species' strengths. The cognitive complexity required for that integration is remarkable. After the leopard's departure, the researchers observed the zebra and hyena pup remaining in place for several minutes, both animals hypervigilant before they cautiously resumed their journey. The zebra's path became more deliberate, favoring areas with better visibility, suggesting an adaptive response to the leopard encounter. As the afternoon progressed, the forest gradually thinned, and the sound of the river grew louder. Shafts of sunlight penetrated the canopy more frequently, creating a dappled effect on the ground. Bird calls changed in character, with the distinctive cries of fish eagles and kingfishers indicating proximity to water. The air became noticeably more humid, carrying the rich, earthy scent of the river ecosystem. Finally, emerging from a dense stand of trees, the zebra and hyena pup reached the banks of the Mara River. The waterway, swollen from recent rains in the highlands to the north, flowed swift and brown, its surface occasionally broken by the snouts and ears of partially submerged hippos. Fallen trees and debris created natural obstacles in some sections, while others presented smoother, though still forceful, currents. On the opposite bank, Visible in the distance were the scattered forms of zebras and wildebeest. Perhaps the very herd from which the injured zebra had become separated days earlier. The zebra approached the water's edge cautiously, testing the muddy ground with each step to ensure stable footing. The hyena pup followed close behind, its body language suggesting a mixture of curiosity and apprehension at the powerful watercourse before them. Both drank deeply from the river, maintaining vigilance between sips, then stood regarding the flowing barrier that separated them from the safety of the herd. "Now they face the ultimate challenge," said Dr. Njeri, adjusting her binoculars for a clearer view of the opposite bank. River crossings are among the most dangerous parts of the migration. Even healthy animals frequently drown or fall victim to crocodiles. The currents are treacherous, and the exit points can be steep and slippery. With her injury and the pup to consider, this crossing may be impossible. If they separate now, it would be the logical conclusion: the zebra swimming across while the hyena remains on this side or finds another route. The research team observed as the zebra and hyena pup spent considerable time at the river's edge, moving along the bank and seemingly assessing different potential crossing points. The zebra would occasionally step into the shallows before retreating, while the hyena pup investigated the scents along the muddy banks, perhaps detecting the presence of crocodiles or other threats. "They're showing remarkable caution," noted Kimathi. Typically, crossing decisions in migratory herds are made quickly, often triggered by a few bold individuals who start the process, creating a cascade effect. This deliberate assessment of options is more characteristic of elephants than zebras. It suggests a level of individual decision-making that's been enhanced by their unusual situation. As twilight approached, painting the sky in spectacular hues of orange and purple, the zebra and hyena pup moved away from the main river channel, following the bank upstream. The research team tracked their movement from a parallel position, speculating that they might be searching for a narrower crossing point or perhaps a natural land bridge. Instead, after following the riverbank for approximately half a kilometer, the pair found a sheltered depression near the water's edge, protected by overhanging vegetation and partially enclosed by the exposed roots of an ancient fig tree that had been partially undercut by the river during previous flood seasons. This natural fortress offered protection from behind and sides, with clear visibility of the river and its potential threats. Here, they settled for the night, the zebra lying down for the first time since the researchers had begun their observations. She folded her legs carefully, easing herself to the ground with a deliberation that suggested she was protecting her healing wound. The hyena pup nestled against her side in what had become their customary sleeping arrangement, its small body fitting perfectly into the curve of the zebra's belly. "They're preparing," Dr. Mwangi noted as darkness began to fall, and the team set up their night observation equipment. Infrared cameras and low-light scopes that would allow them to continue monitoring without disruption. "Tomorrow will likely bring the river crossing attempt. Everything we've seen suggests they'll face it together, despite all evolutionary logic that should drive them apart." As the research team established their own camp for the night, a respectful distance away to avoid influencing the animal's behavior, they found themselves engaged in increasingly philosophical discussions about the implications of what they were witnessing. "I've been thinking about the concept of mutualism in evolutionary biology," Dr. Njeri said as they gathered around a small camp stove, preparing their evening meal. "Traditionally, we understand it as relationships that evolved over thousands or millions of years, like the oxpecker birds that clean parasites from rhinos, or the clownfish that protect sea anemones while gaining shelter. What we're seeing here is mutualism emerging spontaneously, in real time, between species that should be antagonistic. It challenges our understanding of how quickly beneficial relationships can develop. Dr. Omandi nodded thoughtfully, stirring his tea. It makes me wonder how many other potential mutualistic relationships exist in nature that simply haven't been activated because the specific circumstances haven't arisen. Perhaps what we're witnessing isn't as rare as we think. Maybe it's just rarely observed because the conditions that would reveal it are uncommon. There's also the question of what happens if they successfully reunite with the zebra herd. Jabari added, his expression thoughtful in the glow of their small lamp. Will the partnership dissolve once its immediate survival value diminishes? Or has it developed a social component that transcends pure utility? Under the canopy of stars now visible through breaks in the trees, the research team contemplated the significance of what they were witnessing. This unlikely partnership, forged through necessity and sustained through mutual benefit, had already challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relationships and the flexibility of instinctual behaviors. Dr. Mwangi made her final notes of the day by the light of her headlamp, her pen moving rapidly across the page of her journal. "What strikes me most," she said to her colleagues, "is how this challenges our anthropocentric view of animal cognition. We've long assumed that complex social relationships across species boundaries require human mediation or domestication, like dogs and humans or horses and humans. Yet here, we're seeing wild animals, with no history of domestication, forming a cooperative relationship that requires sophisticated recognition of another species' capabilities and needs. It suggests a level of cognitive and emotional flexibility that we've underestimated in wild animals. Whatever happens tomorrow at the river," she continued, her voice soft but intense, "they've already accomplished something remarkable. They've shown us that the boundaries between species are perhaps more permeable than we ever imagined. That cooperation can emerge in the most unexpected contexts when survival is at stake. And perhaps most importantly, they've reminded us that nature still holds mysteries that our scientific frameworks haven't fully accounted for." As night deepened, the sounds of the African wilderness intensified. The resonant grunts of hippos in the river, the distant roars of lions on the hunt, the cacophonous chorus of insects and frogs celebrating the proximity of water. The research team took turns monitoring the infrared feeds, documenting the zebra and hyenas' periodic movements throughout the night. Moments of alertness triggered by distant sounds, brief repositioning for comfort, the occasional quiet interactions between them that seemed almost conversational in nature. Yet within their sheltered hollow by the river's edge, the zebra and hyena pup spent most of the night in peaceful rest, their improbable bond providing a security that neither could have found alone in this dangerous environment. The zebra's ears continued to move, even in sleep, tracking sounds automatically, while the hyena pup occasionally twitched and whimpered in dreams that humans could only imagine. Tomorrow would bring the river crossing, and with it, perhaps the greatest test of their extraordinary partnership. The raging waters, potential crocodiles, and steep banks would challenge even healthy, experienced migrants. For an injured zebra and a juvenile hyena, the crossing represented a formidable obstacle that might finally force them to separate, ending their remarkable journey together. But as Dr. Mwangi noted in her final journal entry before taking her own rest, they've already defied every expectation we had about what's possible between natural enemies. I've learned not to underestimate their capacity for adaptation. Tomorrow will reveal whether their partnership can transcend even the most formidable physical barrier nature has placed in their path. In the darkness, beside the flowing waters of the Mara River, an injured zebra and an orphaned hyena pup slept peacefully together, living proof that in nature, as in science, The most profound discoveries often come from the most unexpected places.